And I had some notes here. Oh. Oh my God. What's up, creepers and geekers? Chris the Atari Creep here, and I hope everyone had an excellent Thanksgiving. I know I most certainly did. And I hope y'all made out the other end, because I know sometimes these family gatherings are, like bob and weave. Bob and weave. But, mine turned out to be good, so I'm going to assume everyone else's did, because if mine could, yours most certainly can. Hey, what's up, everybody? Let's talk a little bit about the Sega 32X. There we go. Now you can see it properly. As usual, it's not going to be a review of the product. I don't generally do that. As if you follow me, and I say that a lot, I like the wacky history behind products such as this. And, a lot of my videos delve more into the weirdness going on behind the scenes than the actual in front of the scenes using the products themselves. So let's just jump right into it after, of course, another sip of coffee, because this is going to be a long-winded discussion. And I'm not here to tell you whether or not I think the product was a good one or not. And I'm most certainly here not going to tell you whether or not I think it was a good idea. I do think it was bizarre that it came out, given the circumstances. Most companies, especially today, as far as video games, you very rarely see them doing multiple things at once. With the exception of, like a home console and a handheld. Nintendo, infamous for that. They would have their home console, then they had the Game Boy, then they had the DS, and then the 3DS, and all kinds of stuff. And Sega had five or six things going on at the same time when this fucking thing came out. And it just blows my mind. Not so much that any of this exists, but in the words of AVGN, what were they thinking? So let's go back. In 1998, I hope I got that right, Sega Genesis is released to us like the most crowned gifted jewel that could ever have been bestowed upon us by the gods. And of course, because it's a 16-bit console, and it's a little edgier, it takes off and does very well. Nintendo's still playing around with their 8-bit systems, which I'm not saying that was a negative, because Nintendo does well what they do well. But rightfully so, they decided to keep low-key, speculation here, see what the Genesis does, and I can tell you what it does, what nintendon't. I threw that one in there just for you. And then come out with their own product shortly thereafter and dominate again. So the Genesis comes out and it does fairly well. And then Nintendo finally releases their Super Nintendo in 1991. And as expected, it takes off. The only thing Genesis had at the time was pretty much their huge stack of games compared to the launch titles, and of course trickled in games here and there for the Super Nintendo. But it was just a matter of time before they would catch up as far as library numbers. And on a technical standpoint, meaning technical abilities, not technically, Super Nintendo outshined the Genesis in almost every way. There's only one part that it really didn't, and we called it blast processing. Whether that's real or not, you figure that shit out. But there was only one part in there which was better with it. So, of course, Sega sees this, and now they get start doing a little scrambling thing. Oh, we got to stay better. We got to stay better. And they come out with the Sega CD in 1992. Let me see if I have it in my notes. It came out in October of 1992. Again, was it a good idea? I don't know. I just know that the technology really wasn't there yet. I wasn't interested in it at the time, nor was I interested in CD-based gaming, nor am I now. But it comes out anyway, and it does what it does for a handful of years. A bunch of crap was released for it, and a bunch of decent stuff was too, and a lot of stuff that we consider like cult classics today. More of a goof. You put it in, you just point and laugh at it, and then you go on and you play Biohazard Battle instead on cartridge. But it obviously didn't do as well as they were hoping it would. Genesis still being very popular for some reason. They really want to boost the Genesis. They want to keep the Genesis going. And that's all well and good. But on the back burners, they also had a 32-bit console in the works called the Neptune. So that's being worked on and what have you. But somebody somewhere said, you know what? That's not going to come out until 1995. So let's kind of finagle some kind of 32-bit something or other and just smash it onto the Genesis, because the Genesis is still doing fairly well, and get that out there, and then people will run and buy this damn console. So it's like, okay, so you have the Neptune in works. I suppose the time it took to make the 32X, they could have come out with the Neptune. Why it was delayed until 1995 in their projections, I don't know. If you want to look that up, go right ahead. I'm sure it's out there. But instead, we got the 32X jam onto the top of our Genesis. That poor fucking thing. It's already got something jammed into its side. Now it's going to have something jammed onto the top. A second item, if you want to count the actual good add-on, the Master System converter. So they come out with it anyway. That's all well and good. Neptune gets scrapped. Okay, so let's recap here. Okay, so we have Genesis, 32X, Sega CD, Neptune on its way. Here's the problem. This came out for $160 on release. Okay, we all know what that means. If you don't have a Genesis, then you got to be buying a Genesis. You're gonna be buying this, and then you got to be buying whatever the 32X game is that you wanted to play. Now, if you already had a Genesis, this is still a hefty deal. It's $160 plus whatever game it was. So most people realize, it's probably better off just to wait for the next console. It'd probably be better. Could be backwards compatible. Who knows? This is where it really gets fucking bizarre to me. And this is where, if I were to be pissed off at Sega, this is where it would happen. You ready? The same way Sega sent this to us, Japan got the Sega Saturn. Yep. They had the Sega Saturn. They're playing with that, and we get this mushroom cloud. Which is a great analogy, by the way. And 500 cords sticking out of it, 60 fucking thousand power supplies, keeping all the stuff together, because there were some games that went with the CD player and the 32X add-on. So, okay, let's recap again. Genesis, CD, 32X, Neptune, Sega Saturn. So, okay, regardless of what happens, we get the 32X. And at the end of the day, there are about 40 games for it, give or take. There were 11 more slotted, but they got canceled. So, what killed this? Well, let's see. It was impractical. Its price point was ridiculous, $160. Brand new. The power supplies. So you needed 2 power supplies for it. The power base converter didn't need one. I don't understand why this did. And if it needed its own power supply, it should have just been its own console. Lack of games and third-party development. Of course, that is always the death of any console. If you can't get people to make games for your product, then it's not going to sell. And they will go to where the games are being made. And finally, just too many eggs in one basket. I mean, again, let's recap. Genesis, Model 1, Model 2, okay? 32X, Sega CD, Neptune, Sega Saturn, and then later on a Model 3 Genesis. That's 7 pieces of hardware either in production or in the works of therefore being produced. I can't imagine the money that costs. Just employing people to even just draw up these things, all the way up to just putting them together and sending them out and shipping them and all that crap. So people got real sick of Sega's shit. I mean, it was just too much crap surrounding the Genesis. Now, who's to blame? I guess at this point, who gives a fuck? But I do want to note that it's funny that both Sega of America and Sega of Japan point their fingers both ways. They both say the same exact thing, just obviously an opposite. When you talk to Japan, Japan was like, well, we wanted to release the Neptune, but Sega of America said, well, our Genesis is still doing so well, so let's just get something to add on to that and keep it going. Whereas if you talk to the Sega of America people, they're like, no, we wanted the Neptune or the Saturn. But Japan said, well, since the Genesis is still selling well over there, we're going to give you this instead just to keep that thing alive. So who's to blame? Everybody. Nobody. So at the end of the day, was it a bad idea? Was it a bad product? You decide. I don't think it was a bad product. I think it was a bad idea. Because at the end of the day, one, we have this to talk about. Two, we got a nifty little hardware. And there are still more games than we would have had just for our Genesis. It's an interesting story, and it's fun to collect for. The market for these things keep doing this. You know, I got lucky, and a friend of mine found it in his basement and said, do you want it? And gave it to me. So some people get them for $5 at flea markets. Some people go on eBay and spend $130. You know, the games, for the most part, aren't too hard to find. And you know what? They are pretty decent, again, for the most part. So, bad idea, good idea, who cares? It's still interesting, and it's Sega, guys. So, I hope this little choppy, quick discussion on the Sega 32X is somewhat entertaining and somewhat informative. You know, we should have just got the Sega Saturn. I don't understand why Japan got that and we got this. And they were still even playing with the idea of the Neptune at that point. But whatever will be, will be. What is it, que sera, sera. So, guys, thank you, as always, for watching. You know, thank you for all your feedback, both positive and negative. It's all positive to me. So if you like this video, go ahead and hit that thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't yet. I would greatly appreciate that. And as always, guys, until next time, take care, and bye-bye.